Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi Brennigan, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Animal Emergency and Referral Center of Minnesota. We are here today to have a virtual conversation with all of you who are watching. Before I get into that, however, I do want to remind you to go ahead and sign up for our live notifications. If you subscribe to those and you happen to be on Facebook when we go live, of course, you'll be notified. And this Thursday is our next one after today at 11:30 on Thursday. Olivia Larson from Optimal Canine will be speaking about crate training. And I know a lot of you have new pets to the family that you've adopted while you've been at home. Maybe you have pets that you've always had, but they're not crate trained and you would like them to be. So Olivia's going to talk about the best way to do that in a really positive fashion. Today's discussion is, again, we've been billing it as a virtual conversation, so we'd really love your participation, your questions, your comments. If you just want to type those in as we're talking, then we will bring those up and relay those as we go along. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Heidi, and I have been at Animal Emergency and Referral Center of Minnesota for about 17, 18 years now, a really long time. And about 8 years ago, I started our pet loss support group because I really saw a need in the East Metro, and I used to facilitate the one at the Animal Humane Society in Golden Valley. So I knew the value of it and how important it can be to people when they're having a really tough time. So that's my perspective on this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Crawford, and I am the clinical social worker at Animal Emergency and Referral Center, as well as Heidi. And she has graciously let me co-lead the pet loss support group for the last couple of years that I've been with the company. And so I do a lot of work with clients around end-of-life care, helping them make decisions around end of life and helping them through the grief process as well and be present for that. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy. I'm the Vice President of Minnesota Pets. We're located here in the Twin Cities, and I'm a licensed social worker as well, and I help oversee our in-home euthanasia services. And so we have doctors who travel to clients' homes to help them say goodbye to their pets in their home. And we have a support team who answers phone calls and takes care of those logistics and also provides support over the phone as well.
Awesome. So I'm going to share with you, ladies, and Colleen already knows this, but February 16th, I did have to euthanize a personal pet of mine. His name was George, and best dog ever, and he had been with me for 16 years, so a really, really long time. And I chose to have that done in my home. AERC does an amazing job, but since I work there, I didn't really want to bring him into a place and have it done where I would constantly be reminded of that, you know, every time I went in that room or that area of the hospital. So I chose to have that done at home. I know a lot of our shareholder hospitals also do in-home euthanasia. So if this is something that you are considering or wanting, please make sure to call your family vet and see if that's something that they offer. We also have Christy with us today from Minnesota Pets, however, because I do know that many of them at this time are not comfortable going into people's homes. And there are several services in the Twin Cities, and Minnesota Pets is one of those that are still offering that service. Is that right, Christine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so anyway, and she's this veterinary social worker, which lends a great deal of expertise along with Colleen's to our conversation today. But back to George, I chose to have that done in my home. It was February, so it was kind of before all of this went down. And since then, as we know, everything has changed. And so I really can't imagine having to deal with something that was that difficult on top of everything else that is going on. Do you ladies agree with me? That seems like a really big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been hearing that from our clients a lot lately. There's a lot of layers to what's going on right now.
Yeah. So Colleen, we were going to talk about kind of some of those changes that have happened.
Yeah. And so with the onset of COVID-19 and the coronavirus, there's, you know, every company and place of business and place of worship and your grocery store has had to make procedural changes to keep their employees safe and to keep the community safe. And that's true for veterinary medicine as well. And so let's spend a few minutes talking about just in general what people can expect, because they may not have had to use their veterinary services yet, which is great. And if they have, then they've maybe experienced some of this. And so, Heidi, can you talk a little bit about what has been happening at AERC in the veterinary emergency clinic? What procedural changes are we experiencing there?
Sure. Well, for care in general, we're doing almost all of it from the curbside care perspective. And I know that that's not uncommon right now. With euthanasia in particular, that's been really, really hard for us to develop something that we felt comfortable with. And I know, Colleen, you were part of that decision, so that our staff would feel safe, but at the same time, clients felt that their needs were at least being listened to. Because that's really, really important to us. And so procedurally at AERC, we are still offering euthanasia as a service. We are doing things a little bit differently in that we only allow one person into the hospital to accompany the pet, which I'm sure can be really challenging for families to kind of try to decide who that individual is. It's to limit the foot traffic within the hospital and keep our team safe as well as our clients. Once inside the hospital, the pet and the owner are escorted to the same place that they always have been, which is what we call our comfort rooms, our final care rooms. And then we have to stay a little bit separated than we previously would have been. So for example, we have an extension set attached to the catheter that's at least 6 feet long so that social distancing can be done while the doctor is giving that injection. Owners are still allowed to have time with their pet before and after. And there's going to be very little touching. You know, we're not going to be able to offer those hugs that previously we might have been able to do, which I know is really hard on our team. Obviously, we're still offering the same aftercare options in terms of cremation and things like that. But basically, the procedure itself has a lot less physical contact, and we only have the one person coming into the hospital with the pet.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Heidi. And Christy, what about at Minnesota Pets? Now, you're a service that actually traditionally would go into someone's home and spend a lot of time with families in their places of being. And I'm wondering how things have changed for you procedurally and how you do things to keep everyone safe now.
Yeah, and I think like Heidi mentioned, the core of what we provide, we haven't wanted that to change. And we want clients to be as present and intimately involved in their pet's goodbye as possible. And we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what we would be able to change to keep everyone safe while still preserving that. And I think, you know, we're at a place where we're able to do that. And there are a couple things that are different. The doctors still are able to go into clients' homes, although it's wonderful if we can have the visit outdoors, and a lot of pets enjoy that too. So that's common. But when the doctor does come into the client's home, she's usually wearing a face mask, and we're asking clients to wear a face mask as well. And we're also having the doctor wear gloves. And of course, she washes her hands before and after. And there's a lot of sanitizing and disinfecting of her things before and between each appointment, you know, which the client doesn't usually see, but it happens every time. And then in the home, like Heidi mentioned, we try to keep our 6 feet of distance at all times. There is a point where the doctor may ask the client to help hold their pet for a few moments while they sedate them. And then when they fall asleep, the client is there with their pet. The doctor usually does a good job of directing, you know, who should stand where at what time to maintain that distance. And the visits are a little bit shorter than they used to be. The doctor's calling ahead of time so that they're talking about what to expect, and some of the things that they go over in person, they're going over the phone now. And then we're also not leaving anything with the client. We used to leave some printed resources, but those are on our website now. And right now we're refraining from making a clay paw print just to protect the client and not give them anything that could be contaminated. And I think it's important to point out that, you know, our doctors self-monitor for symptoms every day, and they wouldn't work if they were feeling ill. But, you know, when we ask clients to tell us if they're ill too, but so often, you know, people aren't knowing when they're sick. And so we're being extra careful, even when everyone's feeling healthy. And also because a lot of our other clients are immunocompromised or are elderly. And that was true even before COVID-19. That was a reason where a lot of families would choose to have someone come to the home for those reasons anyway. And so we're just trying to be extra careful to keep the client safe and our doctor safe and the other families that she helps.
Yeah,
Great.
those are all really great things to be doing. I mentioned when I was talking about how all of this has an effect on everybody involved, whether it's veterinary staff or the clients themselves. And by the way, let me remind everybody watching, go ahead and comment or ask questions as we go, because we're encouraging that. But I wonder if we want to talk for a minute about the experience that all of these changes are having on the people who are experiencing them.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that a little bit. And then Colleen, maybe we can hear from you as well afterwards. But I think with our clients right now, they are, we're hearing more surprise, I guess, from clients that they're able to be present still and that our doctors are still coming into the home. So I wanted to be sure to make that clear that we are still, providing that service. But I think a lot of clients are struggling with the physical space part of it. And I think our doctors are struggling with that too. That is just not a part of how we used to handle visits. And we used to have, the whole family present and lots of hugs and passing of tissues and just things that we're catching ourselves having to not do right now. And that's really different. But I think ultimately, being in the home and the connection that clients are able to have with the doctor, even though it might be lacking a physical, hug or sitting close together, I think that a lot of people are feeling like the emotional connection is still there. And I think we're kind of surprising ourselves with how much that connection isn't relied on physical space or, hugs and that sort of thing. But there's no doubt that, the experience of loss right now during the pandemic is more difficult and there are more layers. And I can definitely talk a little bit more about that. But before I do, I'd love to hear from Colleen about what these procedural changes are feeling like for the emergency team and the veterinary team.
Yeah, I think it's been similarly what you're experiencing, we're experiencing as well. The veterinary professionals take a lot of pride in the care of not just the animals that come into the hospital, but also their human companions. And it's been very hard. And there's been a lot of discussions about how do we maintain our core values and how we want to provide care while keeping everyone safe. And that's kind of been an ongoing discussion since all of this began. And one of the things that I know our veterinary professionals take real pride in is their end of life care and being really compassionate and being really present for the people and creating a really good space for them to experience those moments. And that's been really challenging, like you mentioned, not being able to have contact. We're only allowing one person in the building, which means that if there's 2 or 3 or 10 people that love this animal and want to be there at the end, they're having to say goodbyes at home or in the parking lot, and only one person is allowed to come in. So that's been a real challenge for the veterinary professionals who really want to provide that quality of care and aren't able to right now. Similarly, you said about offering a hug, offering a tissue, holding someone's hand, or just sitting near them and witnessing that experience. It's hard because, like Heidi said, we're using medical tools that allow us that 6 feet of distance, which is a little more uncomfortable for our veterinary professionals who want to be close. And I think the other thing that comes up for me too with this is that sometimes the veterinary professional is the only person who understands a person's bond with their animal. We don't all have the luxury of having people who really get that bond. Yeah. And for a lot of vets, they have a long relationship with these clients and pets, and to not be able to be there in the way that they want to be at end of life can be very hard for them as well.
Sure.
Yeah, there are a lot of moral dilemmas, I think, that the veterinary teams are wrestling with. And I think, clients and all of us just in our daily lives are wrestling with things like, well, I need to go to the grocery store, but it could put someone in danger. And those sort of dilemmas are coming up. And I think it's extra difficult when we're trying to provide, really high level, compassionate end of life care because, safety is important, but also, having people present is important. And it's just a lot to wrestle with. And I think that probably does weigh heavily on the veterinary teams.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, if I could go back for a minute and talk a little bit more about the experience of grief and losing a pet during this pandemic. And then I would love for you to weigh in too. But I think one of the things that we're experiencing right now, just as a society and as people in the veterinary field, is this feeling of, I have my own individual loss during a time when there are a lot of people losing a lot of things and a lot of, people in their lives. And pet loss itself is a disenfranchised form of grief. Like Colleen said, not everyone gets it, and it's not often, acknowledged to the same extent that human loss is acknowledged. And I think we're seeing that on just such a deeper level, even for people who do have people in their lives who understand we're not connected to those people in the same way that we would normally be. So I think that a lot of people are experiencing their loss in a more isolated way, in a way that they maybe feel like they can't even, admit fully to other people and claim that space as easily, because there are people who have lost, human family members and jobs and a lot of other, also significant losses that a lot of people might feel like, I don't feel like I can talk about it with people. They maybe don't understand they have their own losses, which is understandable. But I do think it's important for people to, claim that space for themselves, whether it's just, internally and reflectively or with other people and leaning on people when you need to, and just acknowledging that it is a loss and there are a lot of other losses, but that doesn't minimize the loss that, you've gone through as a pet owner.
So Christy, are you saying that you think that people might be kind of keeping that to themselves, holding it close to their chest more than they normally would, because people are so overburdened with everything that they're just like, all of my friends and family have too much to deal with. They don't need to listen to me as well. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. And I've heard that from our clients, but I've also, I would also just imagine that to be true, because even before the pandemic, we were hearing things like that from clients, like, well, they sort of internalized this idea that it was just a dog or just a cat, because that's the message we get from society, even though we know that that's not true, when we're grieving our pet. And so I think a lot of people, even before the pandemic, felt like, oh, I don't think I should tell my boss that I can't come into work on Monday because my dog died. Or I don't think that I, should tell my friends, because what if they don't understand and they have their own things going on? And so now with the pandemic, I just think that's so amplified.
Okay. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that perspective before.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things that we talked about before when we were talking about this Facebook Live was a idea that a colleague actually shared with me about kind of the way we tend to move in the world, either professionally or personally, that we kind of 80% of the time we're sort of in our comfort zone, and kind of 20% of the time we're out of our elements. And right now, 100% of the time, we're all out of our element, even when we're doing things that we normally feel comfortable doing, because nobody's an expert in the pandemic of 2020. None of us have gone through this before or have the answers or the tools or the expertise to know exactly how this is going to play out. And so I think when you look at that in terms of grief and losing our companion animals, I think our grieving is going to look different. If we've grieved an animal loss before, we might expect it to feel the same or move the same. And even though with each animal it can look different, I think even now it's going to potentially look very different for folks. And to make space for that, to allow for those changes, to know how you're going to grieve in a different way, that you're going to be kind to yourself if you need different things during this time, because it's just different for everyone. And so again, that 80% of the time that you feel comfortable might not feel so comfortable. And where you might know how you have grieved in the past, it might be different this time, and that's okay.
Yeah, I know before Colleen came along and so wonderfully and skillfully facilitated the pet loss support group, when it was just me by myself doing it, I used to tell people all the time that grief is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so I think even in the best of times, we try to rush ourselves through it, and we aren't gentle with ourselves and giving ourselves that time that we might need without even realizing it. And so I would imagine that goes doubly for a time like this.
Yeah.
So Christy, you touched a little bit on kind of this collective grief that everybody's going through of never having been through this pandemic type experience and the isolation of that experience. How are people dealing with that at this time?
I mean, I think it's so much harder than it used to be to get that support, which for pet loss was always sort of difficult in a lot of ways. And we've been seeing clients, become very creative in how they're sharing the loss of their pet. And it's interesting how, in a lot of ways, this pandemic is, through all the awfulness of it, there's some creativity coming out in how we're connecting with each other and using technology and that sort of thing. And we're seeing that with memorializing pets and connecting with people for social support. We've had clients who have had Zoom funerals for their pets or Zoom, memorial services. And I think that's especially, amazing when there are a lot of extended family who love that pet, grandparents and aunts and uncles of that pet. And I think that's really wonderful. And to be able to say a few words and toast to the pet, and it's just kind of a nice celebration of life that we wouldn't normally get.
I love that idea because I don't think people were doing that before any of this happened, right? I mean, I don't remember people telling me, maybe they would have a small service with the literal nuclear family, in their yard if they were burying those cremains or something. But I've never heard of people utilizing technology in that way. So that's really neat.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're almost rethinking how we were doing things before. And I don't think anyone would argue that before the pandemic, we were grieving exceptionally well, for our pets in this country. I think it's something where we've always kind of struggled to mourn in a way that we felt, right about, but also in a way that society felt right about. And it was just always this constant push-pull. And, that's why we have veterinary social workers like Colleen and I. And so I think it is a chance for us to kind of reset and think what parts of what we were doing before do we want to carry through and make better, and what parts do we not want to, carry through. And I think we don't really want to carry through this idea of grieving alone and not reaching out for support. Which a lot of us did before this pandemic. We would just, get through it on our own and wait for time to help us out. And I think now we're realizing, that we can reach out and use technology and Zoom and FaceTime and texts and emails and social media and everything that we can use. And we've also had a lot of clients, notify people in their lives of their pets passing by sending sort of a card or a postcard and doing, social media obituaries and eulogies, which is really wonderful to see.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. And I'm just going to echo what you said about this really being, if we can take it that way, an opportunity to really rewrite how we want all of this to look and do away with the things that just didn't serve us before. Yeah, that's really exciting. Colleen and I, like I said, we facilitate the pet loss support group at the clinic. And let's see, when did this all first go down? In March, I think March, we skipped our first group. Is that right, Colleen, if you recall? Yeah. And then we got some comments on Facebook saying, hey, why don't you do a Zoom group? And I was like, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't we? So for April, we did a Zoom group. And Colleen, why don't you share your perspective of it? Because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I was really nervous because as a social worker, and Christy, you can chime in and back me up here, but we're trained to be with people and read people and help people and be present with people. And it's a little scary to do in this format where I can only see from here up and I can't read your body language and see how you're doing. And especially in a group setting where you've got multiple people that you want to keep the space safe for and allow them to have the ability to share. So I was really nervous about how it was going to go. And we had a wonderful group, and I think we had 6 or 8 people attend. And I always send out an email afterwards to let folks know how to get in touch with us, because not everyone who comes is our clients. If they need things between now and the next group, and some resources and things like that. And I don't usually get much response to that email. In previous months of our group in person, but I got lots of responses to this email. They were very appreciative. One, that we had it, and two, that they were able to be in their own home. So it was really interesting to think about potentially how much safer, more comfortable they were, since, like you said, Christy, pet loss is a form of disenfranchised grief. And so there is some shame and some fear with that. And for them to be able to be on their couch or be in their rocking chair in their own space, potentially with some of their animals' things that provide that comfort, to be able to quickly, show a picture that is sitting there, was really nice for folks. And so it was a really eye-opening experience for me to learn that this might actually be a much better way, and entice people that who wouldn't normally come to an in-person group at our clinic. Like Heidi mentioned, coming to a place that they maybe had to euthanize their animal might be really triggering or upsetting.
Or if they have mobility issues. I know in the past we've had people say, I really wish you were closer to me. I can't get to you at the Oakdale facility. So that's also a thing.
Yeah. And so now we're rethinking, hey, maybe even once the pandemic is done, this is something we'd like to offer to be able to have more people in the community be able to benefit from. So
Right.
it's an interesting new and creative strategy we're learning about because of this.
I love that. I'm so glad that you guys are doing that via Zoom. And I can imagine that, for a lot of people, grieving is just hard work in general. And to get yourself together and get the courage to drive somewhere in either an environment that has bad memories or is just unfamiliar in general, to make it so easy and they can do that from their own couch, I can imagine that would just be so much more familiar for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like Colleen said, kind of unanticipated. From my perspective, I'm not a social worker, and so I wasn't thinking of it the same way Colleen was at all. I'm actually pretty comfortable with Zoom and Facebook Live and all of these things. And I was just like, wow, it really feels like people are participating more than they do in person. So, and maybe that does come from feeling safe right out of the gate, and you're not sitting in a room with strangers, you're sitting on your couch and people are just sharing their own experiences. So I don't know if it made the group more approachable. And of course, people are going to be different. Some people are going to prefer that in-person communication, but I think it was a pleasant surprise for both of us that it went as well as it did.
Mm-hmm. And then from that, we had another idea to create a Facebook group. And Heidi, do you want to talk about that, since you basically built that?
Yeah.
For us?
So, and in fact, Chelsea, who's listening and watching right now, thanks, Chelsea. She wanted to talk about resources. So this is one resource, and then I'll turn it over to you guys to talk about some others. But we started a pet loss support group that's a Facebook group. And if you'd like to join that, you just go to Animal Emergency and Referral Center of Minnesota's main page, and you'll see a section that says groups, and you can click to join that one. It's for anybody who has lost a pet, honestly, and it's a safe space where people can come to share that experience. We will be posting some informative content, educational content, as well as just asking people how they're doing and if they'd like to share their own experiences. And it doesn't matter whether you lost a pet like I did before the pandemic or whether it's been a pandemic experience for you. It doesn't matter. And we just thought that that would be a nice way to connect with people between groups, because currently our pet loss support group just meets once a month, and that can be a lot of space between meetings for people who are looking for that support, who maybe don't have it. Like Christy said, it's a disenfranchised grief. And so maybe, you're not as fortunate as people who work in the veterinary profession, who are surrounded by animal lovers day in, day out. Maybe the people in your life have told you it's just a dog, or it's just a cat, or it's just a rabbit, which can be so painful. And so we have this group now. It's just getting started, really, and you can join that and then and have that support 24/7, because of course Facebook never closes. Did you guys want to talk about other resources, either in the community or online, or books or anything like that that you might have to recommend?
Yeah, and so Minnesota Pets also has a Facebook page and a Instagram page and Twitter page, and it's not specifically, it's for anyone. It's not just for Minnesota Pets clients, and we post a lot of tributes and articles, and occasionally now Facebook Lives and different things that we're trying out. due to the pandemic and different ways to reach people. So people can check that out. And then our MinnesotaPets.com website lists a resource page that I'm in the process of making sure is updated with all of the, pandemic related resources and like the support groups that are now holding their groups via Zoom. So those are really good places to start. That resource page also lists our favorite book recommendations, which hasn't changed. And then we also have a grief email series on that page. And we have one specifically for people who have lost a pet. And it's a series, you sign up for it and you get an email every few days over 30 days, just kind of guiding you through that first month. And then we also have a newer email series for parents who have children of any age, to guide them through the first 10 days after the loss. And so
let me jump in right there, because actually Anna, who's watching, that was a specific question that she had, was what advice do you have for helping children through pet loss, especially at this time? And I know those emails provide some really valuable stuff, because I signed up for them after I lost George.
Yeah, and it's really, I think, especially hard right now because kids have so much going on and so many other losses that they're trying to process with school, going online and not seeing their friends. And I think, what we've been telling our clients is just having some real, like, transparent and open conversations, answering questions honestly, not hiding things from our kids, which is sort of our first instinct because we want to shield them, from that pain. But having those conversations is really important. And that email series kind of walks through 10 different aspects of guiding kids through that change and that loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I can jump in on that too, just to give a couple of quick tips, depending on what age the child is, for the person who asked the question. For our younger kids, preschool age and early elementary, it's really important to be concrete and use kind of simple language. Some of the things that I share with clients is to actually say the animal is dead and to explain death as death is when the body stops working. Some of the kind of more gentle things that we tend to think are good to say, that the animal has gone to heaven or has transitioned. Those can be things that are challenging for a child who's kind of very concrete thinking to understand. So being really simple and concrete is really a helpful thing. And then the other thing I like to share with families is also that children grieve very differently. And Christy, I'm sorry, I haven't seen your series, so you might cover this in there, but that they tend to grieve in fits and starts a little bit differently than we do. Their brains aren't quite set up to sit in a tough emotion for a real long time like ours can. We can sit in our sad for a long time. They tend to kind of get the sad and then they move on. And so it can be jarring for a parent who's also grieving to see the child kind of quickly be like, have a moment of crying and then want to go play. But that's really fairly normal for a kid. It'll kind of ebb and flow as they move through their grief a little bit differently. So yeah, I would definitely check out Christy's series. It sounds great.
It is. Yeah, and what to Colleen's point, I didn't know that about kids before we lost a cat of ours, and I was more broken up about that cat than I thought it would be, but technically it was my son's cat, and he was devastated for about 2 hours, and then he had moved on and was totally fine. And a couple of days later, when I said I was upset about this cat, he's like, still? And I was like, oh, and it was wounding. And then I learned later from Colleen, no, that's normal. And he probably will cycle back through that over the period of several weeks. And he might be really sad one night at bedtime, and then he's fine, and then he's not, and then he is. And so that was really eye-opening for me to be like, oh, okay, he's just not capable of grieving in the same way that adults are. That was really helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions from the community?
We have a lot of people thanking us for this conversation, so that's so nice. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Anne, for chiming in. Anne says they're facing this right now. Our sympathies go out to you. That's so tough. Yeah. Can we talk about, and I know this isn't pandemic specific, but we're privileged in since we are around people who are experiencing this and hearing their experiences after the fact, to know a lot of ways that people memorialize their pets. And can we share some of those? Because I know some of those are unique and wouldn't occur to a lot of people. And I think that that can be helpful.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. We have, and on our website, we have articles about memorializing, because just the possibilities are endless. And if you look online or on Pinterest, it's really amazing to see all of the different things people can do. But I would encourage people to think about ways that kind of match their own, I don't know, what fits for them. So for some people, they really like to do some things with their hands and crafts and arts and different sort of paw prints. Right now, because Minnesota Pets, we're not offering paw prints, we have an article that gives some ideas for clients to make their own paw prints or paw arts of different sorts. And so we have that on our website. And then I think outside of, doing things with your hands and arts and crafts type memorializing, I would encourage people to memorialize in ways that include other people that you trust, that can understand, or other people that you can help, understand. A lot of people maybe haven't faced this themselves, but they care about you and they want to understand. So bringing people in and doing those, memorial services, or writing them letters and just sharing with them in some way that the pet has passed away. We've received several postcards from clients, sort of like a save the date for a wedding. It's printed out like that, and it has a picture of the pet, and on the back it has a little story and that they had to say goodbye. And I think that's a really great way to share that with people in a way that and lets them know so that they can offer their support. What about you, Colleen? Have you seen clients doing any different things lately?
I wouldn't say necessarily different things lately, but we hear about all kinds of creative things. Like you said, the sky's the limit. And I think I would agree with you to find something that is personal and meaningful for you and how you want to continue the bond with that animal as you move through life, and so things, people will do things in the garden. They'll plant special trees or bushes, or there's different kinds of, like, you can make a flagstone that you can make or you can buy and have names and pictures put on them. So some people really, if they had a lot of good memories outside in the yard or in the garden with that animal, that might be a really good place to do something. Like you said, other people do the arts and crafts. Some people like to do different things with ashes. So some folks will bury or scatter ashes. Other people will keep them in a special kind of urn or a box of some kind. And then other people will take ashes and put them into things. There's all kinds of jewelry and paperweights and other keepsake items that you can send just a little bit of ashes away and have it put into and made into something that you can keep with you or wear. Some people have even put ashes into ink for a tattoo. We've heard of that, that there are some tattoo artists that do that. That's probably not something you can do right now, so that you'd have to put a pin in that one. But there are really lots of ideas out on the internet. Like you said, Christy, Pinterest has been a place where I've seen a lot of people post creative ideas. The photo albums, creating a memorial space in the home with pictures and the color and the paw print, writing a story or a letter, or just writing down all the things that were unique, the things that they did that made them special to you, the good things and the naughty things, all the things that you want to remember. There's just so many great ways. And I think, Christy, I like what you said about trying to include others in that. I saw one person put out on Facebook a request for other people's stories. Like, here, I lost my pet, and can you share with me what your favorite memory was, to put in a collection. And so to really include others as best we can during this time in that mourning process is great.
I think those are all great ideas. I want to add to that. Colleen always talks about continuing the bond, and you mentioned it just now. And before I lost George, I told her I didn't really understand what she meant by that. And then I realized that there's these little ways that you miss your pet every day, giving them medications, especially when they're senior, the way George was. He used to wait at the top of the stairs for me to come up from the basement because he couldn't do the stairs at the end. the walks, all of these sorts of things. And the one thing that I have been doing, and I want to share this because we have so many people who attend our group and think they're going crazy, is that I'll show it to you. I have this little nightlight, and this was important during the last days of George's life because George would sleep in my bedroom and he couldn't see very well because he had those gray old man eyes. And I was always scared because of his bad mobility and the fact that his vision wasn't great, that he was going to get up in the middle of the night and fall and hurt himself or something. You know how we worry about our pets. And so I had this nightlight on every night for him. And that was the thing where the first night he was gone, I was like, I have to turn on George's nightlight. And I've been turning on George's nightlight every night since then. And we get a lot of people who say things like that. You know, I'm sleeping with their ashes under my pillow. I'm curling up in their dog bed. I'm sleeping with their bandana so I can smell it. And I just want to remind people that those are all completely fine. Whatever you want to do to continue that bond is a-okay. And you know, it's not crazy because a lot of people are concerned about that. Don't you think, Colleen?
Absolutely. Everybody grieves differently. And I think, Christy, you kind of alluded to this earlier about, you know, our society in the United States. We don't kind of talk about death and mourning like other communities and countries do. And so we're not maybe as good at knowing what to do and how to do and what's okay and what's not okay. And really with grief, you know, everything is pretty much okay. You know, for some people, it's keeping things near. For other people, it's kind of clearing things out and not having those visual reminders. And for some people, it's never getting another dog. And for some people, it's getting a cat the next day and everything in between. And all of those things are absolutely okay. Everybody will grieve differently. Even within the same house, it's going to look different for each person, depending on the relationship they had with that animal. And so to have a little grace with yourself and with each other, and reach out for help and share what you're thinking and feeling. And I think these different online communities provide a nice, safer space to potentially share what you're thinking and saying, you know, like, is this okay? Is this normal? Are other people experiencing this too? And I'd say 99% of the time, you're gonna have somebody who's gonna be like, oh yeah, I've been there and done that, and it's okay.
Absolutely. Now, thank you for that perfect segue because we have one last question that I want to address, and then we'll be wrapping it up. So if you have a question, definitely get it in, and one of us will be answering those questions, just typing underneath your questions. So even if we don't address it live here today, it can still get answered. Teresa Shores is asking about thoughts on bonding with a new dog. Colleen, you mentioned some people, you know, right away need to get a new pet. Now, I don't know what the time frame was for Teresa, but she says, any thoughts on bonding with a new dog after losing a past one over a year ago? Okay, she did share that. She said the new one reminds her of the one that she lost.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really common. And I think, you know, whether you get a new pet the next week or 5 years later, it's so normal to draw those comparisons and just see your previous pet and your new pet. And I think that's difficult, but I also think that, you know, it's just so normal. And you might notice things in your new pet that remind you of your old pet, which can be a really wonderful thing. And so I would, you know, kind of remind people that there is no timeline for grief and there is no deadline. And it doesn't end the day that you get your next pet. It's something that you can, you know, carry through, and not in a negative way. It doesn't mean that you will be sad, you know, forever. It means that you'll always remember your pet and you can carry that into your new relationship with your new pet. And I think it's okay if you notice that, you know, reminds you of your previous pet, to acknowledge that and sort of celebrate that in the moment, and, you know, let it bring you some comfort instead of letting it, you know, make you feel guilty, which would also be very normal. But I think it's okay to kind of reframe that too and see that as, you know, a continuing part of the bond, like we had just been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Christy. And we even had one client who shared with me that she would tell stories to her new pet about her old pet when those things would come up, as just a way to move it out of her brain space and share it. And
that's so sweet. I really like that.
Yeah, to say, you know what, this reminds me of when, you know, Fluffy used to do this, or or sometimes the comparison is the opposite. It's the thing we miss that the new animal doesn't do. And so to share those things and finding a way to create meaning for yourself around those, I think is what's really important in those moments.
Yeah, that's really nice. How about dog shaming? Because I do that with my other dog, Sally, because she can't seem to find the food on the floor in the same way that George was able to. And so I have dirty floors all the time, which I never thought I would have having a dog. So she gets shamed unfairly a lot. Oh, all right. Well, ladies, this was great. Thank you so much. Dr. McComas, who I know you're familiar with, Christy said, thanks so much for taking the time to share your expertise with our community. It's a tough time and it's so needed right now. Thank you, Dr. McComas. It was really nice of you to say that. And I want to thank everybody who is watching. And this video, if you want to share it with somebody, will be available on our video page after 10-15 minutes, I think, when it's done processing. Thanks so much, ladies, for this conversation today. I think Dr. McComas is right. I think that it's something that doesn't get talked about often enough, and I really enjoyed speaking with both of you.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Heidi. This is great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.